let me tell you a little bit about my own personal ChatGPT guru, Steve Dalton, because I think fully 13 years ago, believe it or not, Steve, I was an MBA 1 at the University of Michigan, and my own career coach at Ross had told me, hey, there's this guy writing a book about the off-campus job search. And here you are, a former kindergarten teacher, wants to go into like educational technology, whatever that is. Really the only guy who can help you, can save you from a pitiful fate, is this one guy at Fuqua, this one guy in North Carolina. And then I go on Amazon to buy his book, only to discover it's not coming out for a few more months. And so I make Steve this crazy offer. What if I become your 2-hour job search guinea pig?
Patient zero.
Exactly, that's right. And I'm happy to say that I've infected a lot of people since then in the best possible way, because I ran my own little job search experiment, and then the rest is history. Probably a lot of you have this right now on your bookshelves behind you on Zoom. You have it in your students' hands. It really is the Bible when it comes to building great relationships that lead to great careers. But it doesn't end there. Steve's story has continued into building this new business, Contact to Colleague. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Steve?
Sure. Essentially, the services that I offer to colleges where I help students learn networking for the purpose of getting job interviews and learn frameworks for doing everything else in the job search to help it get it done efficiently and effectively. I apply a lot of that to, or I offer that to companies as well, because the ability to network internally levels the playing field. It's not everybody comes from the same background or recognizes the importance of that critical skill. You need to get visibility in your organization. And despite how critical that is, nobody ever teaches you how to do it in a formal way. We're required to do speech classes and learn history in high school, but we're never required to turn strangers into advocates on demand. So that's the consummate skill of the modern workplace. That's what I do for companies, for alumni organizations, for volunteer organizations through Contact a Colleague.
So if anyone is interested in learning more about that, please, please, please reach out to Steve at the end of the session, and I'll send you that link. In the meantime, Steve has not given up on the life of the author. So tell us about The Job Closer and what led to this new title.
Yeah, absolutely. So The Job Closer, it only took me 9 years to come out with my follow-up book. If someone's already said it, I don't really want to spend time saying it again. But what was happening was people were successful getting interviews and getting job offers by using the 2-hour job search. And people would ask me, Steve, I got an interview. What book do you recommend for interviewing? And I had to be honest, I didn't like any of them. They were all the same thing I hated about job search books on networking. They were all very tip focused. Put yourself out there, sell yourself. That works for a fraction of people, but not for awkward chemical engineers like me. I like instructions. And there weren't instructions in the career services space. The 2-hour job search is instructions for networking, but the Job Closer is a collection of my recipes, my instructions for every other step of the job search, from resumes and cover letters in the front end to answering, tell me about yourself, or what is your biggest weakness, or negotiating an offer, or getting off to the right start with your manager on the back end.
I love that. And so one of the things I just shared in the chat is like, I think what drew me to you from the very beginning, Steve, is like, you didn't have to be born a type A, charismatic, whatever we envision as the king or queen of the jungle. Even awkward introverts, even international students can find their way to great opportunities through techniques like the Job Closer, 2-hour job search. And then, as if that didn't level the playing field enough, what launched last year except for ChatGPT? And so Steve and I have kicked off a little conversation that at first was purely private, just in terms of trying to understand, what does this mean for the 2-hour job search? What does this mean for networking in 2023? But we figured it would be a lot more fun to invite you to the dialogue as well, which leads us to our session today, a non-standard webinar in the best sense of the word, because we're going to be throwing pop quizzes at you, including pop culture. Stay tuned for that one. We're going to be asking you to try the stuff on your side. As a former kindergarten teacher, I firmly still believe the best way to learn anything is to get your hands dirty. So even if you rated yourself as a 1 on our ChatGPT scale, this is the moment. Pull up ChatGPT, pull up Bard, which is now available to everyone. Pull up Bing Chat. They're all free, and it's a great way to learn just by doing right alongside us. And then third and finally, we're even going to do live role plays. This is your chance to go one-on-one with Steve Dalton like never before and win a free copy of the LinkedIn book just for doing so. So with that said, let's get into really the ultimate question here, which is, how is a smart search, whether it's a networking search, a prospecting search, a job search, how is it like an episode of The Bachelor? Is it because searching is like dating? There's always that metaphor of kind of going on awkward first dates. Is it all about getting leverage like The Bachelor has? Or is it the fact that your heart is inevitably broken by the end of this so-called season? So A, B, or C, what's the comparison here? What are you saying so far, Steve?
Wow, 99.9% coming in hot on A's.
Yeah, Helen even says A exclamation mark. Dion agrees and Eve agrees. But what is your argument here, Steve?
I would say The Bachelor is not like dating. Dating is a much healthier process than The Bachelor. But The Bachelor is all about getting leverage. So for example, if you're The Bachelor on a show called The Bachelor, you're going to win. So hats off to you, sir. Well played. If you're one of the 30 contestants on a season of The Bachelor, that's a different value prop. Like your supply is artificially restricted to just one bachelor, demand artificially stimulated because you live in a house with all your competition. There's an opportunity cost. You have to give up several months of normal dating to go on the show. It's a blind purchase. You don't know until you show up on the first day that the guy you're fighting over is Pilot Pete. And it's just, there's so much bad about it, and it's all on national TV. So I see so many, we all laugh. We are like, yeah, that would be terrible. Why would anyone do that to themselves? But I see people do this to themselves willingly every time they start a job search. And the easiest way to do that is to start applying to online job postings. You kind of know you're never going to hear back, but you kind of don't know what else to do. So you do it again and again and again and again. And after a while, that takes a toll on your confidence. And once you start emitting that desperation into the marketplace, it's a lot harder to do the networking that actually gets you interviews in a predictable fashion. So we need to reframe this job search away from I'm a commodity, there's 500 people applying for this job, towards, oh, there's only one of me and there's thousands, if not millions of companies. Like, how do I prioritize which ones are worth my finite amount of time and pain tolerance to pursue?
Yeah, I think that is so important because even when I was starting my own search 13 years ago, I was really focused on like, I've got to work at Fisher Price. They're the ones who are doing cool stuff in education and technology. Steve immediately, within 5 seconds of showing me his lamp list technique, got me to realize there was a whole universe of contestants to be competing for me, the suitor. So definitely a great way of thinking about it. And if you want to get leverage, whether as a rainmaker, whether as a networker, whether as a job searcher, I think as Steve said, you want to cast that relatively wide net. And before we get into an actual demo of how you might do this with LinkedIn, with ChatGPT, with all that stuff, do you want to talk about sort of first steps, first principles, Steve?
Yeah, so the lamp list that Jeremy mentioned, and for those of you who are not familiar with The Bachelor, it is a terribly awesome TV show. Be proud if your country doesn't have an edition of it. But yeah, basically one person interviews dozens of candidates and he kicks a few of them off each week until only one remains and romance blossoms for a couple of weeks. So the lamp list that Jeremy mentioned is kind of the fundamental concept at the start of the 2-hour job search. Basically, we want to recast this job search that we're the bachelor or the bachelorette rather than one of 30 contestants or 300 contestants over and over and over again. So the way we do that is we create a large consideration set, a minimum of 40 organizations that feels overwhelming, but in the 2-hour job search, I give you 4 different brainstorming methods, 10 minutes each. It breaks it down. You brainstorm different companies by coming at it from different directions. Once you have that 40, then we find 3 pieces of data which are easy to find and predictive of success. A is for the presence of alumni or advocacy from groups that of people like you. Motivation is your own willingness to put in the effort to keep reaching out to people, even if people ignore you. And posting is a proxy for urgency. If you see an open position, you know a lot of other job seekers are approaching them right now. We need to move on this one immediately.
I love that. And I built a list very similar to this. And even with the technology of 2010, I was like, wow, there are so many fish in the sea. Why was I so desperate before? But I think the big thing now is that with ChatGPT, there's actually a possibility to cast even a wider net above and beyond the things that you already know about. And so to demonstrate what this looks like, we'd love to have a volunteer raise their hand on Zoom right now. If you're the first person to do so, you get a copy of the LinkedIn book, and you get to go one-on-one with Steve to really see how you might use this cool new AI tool to figure out what's possible. So I saw Mark's hand go up first. Mark, I'm going to give you the ability to unmute your line. If you would feel comfortable doing so, we'd love to connect with you. Welcome, Mark.
Hey there.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Hey, Mark.
I'm doing all right.
Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a software product manager. I've been doing it for about 10 years. And I've kind of been going about it from an angle of versatility instead of focus, which I realize now maybe I need to be a little bit more focused about what I'm doing. But as a result, I've been in human resources, I've been in agriculture, I've been in data centers, I've been in financial services. So I've been in a lot of different industries doing software product management stuff.
Absolutely. And so when you think about what brought you to the session today and what you really want to get out of, this year and the next couple of years, what's your goal? What are you trying to achieve?
Well, like you guys have been saying today, seems like there's a lot of untapped potential in ChatGPT, and we get so focused on this mindset of, well, okay, so what can the tool do to me? What am I allowed to ask it for? And the more that you start to realize that you can ask anything, it almost becomes overwhelming what it is that you can ask. I even saw something the other day where someone on LinkedIn said, yes, tell ChatGPT that it is an interviewing expert at this industry and start to quiz me and give me feedback. And that just blew my mind. So I'm hoping to learn more tricks today.
Absolutely. And so would you say that a fair exercise to run through together is kind of imagining, hey, what could be a next great place for you to apply your product management skills? Would that be a good
Absolutely.
fit? Okay, awesome.
Yes.
And so, Steve, what do you think? How could we even start with sort of this blank screen on ChatGPT to help Mark get a sense of that universe of possibilities, make him the bachelor?
Yeah, so I love, so if you, I guess, Mark, let me put it back to a question of you. Do you have like a handful of dream employers that would be your next stop?
I sure do, yes.
So what are some of those?
So Beyond Identity is one of my top. 1Password is probably the second on my list. Visa actually comes up a lot because I'm very interested in the area of fraud, and there's an office in my area. And if I pick one more, let's say OpenAI itself.
Ooh, love it. Very meta.
A little bit meta, yeah. So one of the things that I really like doing when you're creating a lamp list, like an L column, and is let's come up with 3 topics that you enjoy learning about. The common mistake I see people make, especially working in tech, is they'll pursue Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and Google, and those companies don't really have anything in common. So what you learn when you do an informational meeting with one won't help you with another. So what I would like to do would be, let's ask Jeremy, since you've got the screen shared, I would ask ChatGPT, what do these companies have in common?
Ooh,
what are some commonalities of these companies? This is a bright spot analysis. Basically, let's start with the companies that you're excited about, and let's ask it, well, you tell me what these things have in common. And so much of ChatGPT is iterative. Like, you may like some of the answers it gives you, you may not like some of the answers, and you can give it that feedback. So does what we see here is immediately it kind of says, here are some, cybersecurity and digital identity. Does that resonate with you, Mark?
Sure does, yes.
Cool.
So now what we can do here is ask it for, what other companies would you suggest that are in this universe of cybersecurity and digital identity employers?
Yeah, I think this
or maybe the top 20 largest employers in this space.
And I think this is such an important call out here for folks who are brand new to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is basically the opposite of Google. Mm-hmm. Google is a really great at a one-shot search, right? You do your search, and then Google immediately forgets what you just searched, and you start over the next time you go to the Google box. ChatGPT, at least in its current iteration, remembers the conversation. So you don't have to go back and lay out everything over and over again. Instead, like you're conversing with a career coach, you keep the conversation going. So what are the top 20 companies in this same universe? Again, one thing to keep in mind is that ChatGPT and many of these models have data that comes from a couple of years back. So this may not represent the hottest startups in the space, but at least directionally, this will give you a place to begin. What do you think about that list, Mark?
Let's see, I know something about a couple of these, and I know that I don't want to work for them. I'm surprised to see some companies here that I didn't think about before. I hadn't thought about McAfee. I hadn't thought about IBM Security. In fact, I didn't realize there was something separate called IBM Security. Fortinet is what I'd never heard of before. Checkpoint, I thought was out of business a long time ago, but maybe I'm wrong on that one.
I think this plays exactly to Steve's point around the Bachelor, right? Like, you had, I think, 3 contestants on your dance card when we first started, right? Those handful of companies you mentioned. Now your dance card is filling up, and all these companies want someone with your skills. So already you're getting more leverage. Where would you go next, Steve?
I would start looking through the ones that you're unfamiliar with to see if there's some other insight. Is there another angle or flavor of cybersecurity or identity management that appeals to you? And then we can ask for 20 more companies similar to that once you've done a little bit more research. This is a very iterative process. So I would say let's look through these 20, see which ones feel hot, which ones feel cold, and drill down further on the ones that are hot. Now, I don't want you to get into an analysis paralysis stage. Like, to me, 40 is the right sweet spot. Once you have a list of 40, we can put it into a lamp list and use it to prioritize who are the top 6 that we're going to focus our networking efforts on. And if they're not, if we find companies that are in like the 10 to 15 range, they're too far down on our list. They're not high enough priority based on the data to spend our limited time networking with them. So we'll go ahead and throw a resume at them, but I really want to focus on that top 6 for networking purposes. But this is just one technique out of the 4 that I would show in the or talk through in the 2-hour job search. We just want to keep using that bright spot analysis. Let's zoom in on the ones that are good matches and ask ChatGPT to identify some similarities for us.
What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. And so I think the message really is, whether you're at Mark's stage of his career, basically already developed awesome skills, just ready to get more people competing for your talents, or you're a brand new job seeker and you're just like, what can I do? What can I do with a sociology degree and a passion for animals? Maybe those are the 2 things that just make up who you are. The beautiful thing about ChatGPT is it never gets stuck. It doesn't say, oh, I have no idea. It just throws out options. And not every option is going to be perfect, as we were talking about with, maybe some of these companies have gone out of business, but you just don't have to be stuck anymore. You've got someone you can call upon even at 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, Mark?
Yeah. So,
Hey,
so
Mark.
question,
Yeah.
a little bit of question on that.
Yeah.
There's often a tendency to, he's like, well, I've done a lot of this thing. I guess I should continue to do the same thing because
Ooh.
that's what I'm going to get paid the most for. But it feels like there are often lateral opportunities that don't come up when I'm thinking about this on my own. Yeah, of course, McAfee plays into space. Of course, Symantec, if they still existed, played into that space. But who else would be looking for someone like me that I would not ordinarily make my top list?
Aha. This is like the ultimate career, almost life question, Steve.
Yes,
like not just
absolutely.
How do you find a random job? How do you build a life that you love, especially if you don't know everything that's out there?
In my experience, very rarely does the right answer start with the question, who will have me? Who will be interested in me? It's so much more driven. I've seen people become experts in brand new fields, like starting now, like just deciding this is something I enjoy learning about. Let me learn more and more about that. Let me talk to smart people who've been successful in the space, see what I can learn. That momentum, that growth curve is so much more important than your existing knowledge. All of our existing knowledges, I hopefully ChatGPT reinforces this. Everything we know currently is going to be out of date very, very quickly. So our existing knowledge only will get us so far. Technology is moving at such a rapid clip. Find what you enjoy learning about. Pick a couple topics that you just are curious about. And there's probably an interstitial place of like, how can I combine what I've been doing and add value to this other space that I hadn't really considered through a combination of networking and learning on my own. And that's really where the beautiful work to be done in the future is going to be. It's the mashups rather than a pure play, I'm going to continue being this. If your heart's not in it anymore and you're not learning at the same rate, you're going to plateau. So I would say, figure out, pay attention, and this isn't something you need to answer right now. Pay attention to what you enjoy learning about. What articles are you drawn to when you read a newspaper or a business magazine? And if you're kind of paying attention to particular genres, that's probably a pretty good sign that that's a direction you should be nudging yourself in.
And then the number one last thing I'll say before we move to some questions is that when in doubt, Mark, just ask ChatGPT. In the same way that if you could afford a career coach on demand who is always there at your beck and call, even at 3 o'clock in the morning, you would say, hey, I'm paying you. I'm going to ask you this question. Just ask it right to ChatGPT. Again, even if the answer isn't perfect, it gets you off the schneid. It says, hey, you may have always thought I'm just a product manager. That's who I am. But have you ever thought about AI strategy and consulting? Have you ever started about building your own business? Have you ever thought about subgenres of that field? There's so much richness in the world. And this helps you get a sense of what's possible. So Mark, we have to thank you for showing us what's possible through your amazing example.
Jeremy, can I jump in with one
Yeah.
more
Oh, yeah, please do.
suggestion? Can you toss in the question, what are the 10 terms I need to know as a product manager new to the AI space?
Ooh,
Because
I love that.
ChatGPT is really, really good at turbocharging your learning ability. And a lot of our insecurity stems from not speaking the language. ChatGPT is really good at helping you acquire that language quickly. So again, play with it, lean on it. It's going to be really good at this stuff. It's going to help you learn fast. That's why my mind's been spinning, because it's no longer, how do I learn X? It's like, what do I want to spend my learning time learning about right now? That I could learn about anything in a really efficient fashion. Now I need to choose my spots.
And I will just add a little bonus hack, because we're all about bonus hacks, Steve. Is if you're like, hey, I got to learn machine learning, but I don't even know how to get started, always point your browser to LinkedIn Learning. You can get free access, not only through your universities in some cases, but almost always through your public library. Everywhere I go in America, I always look up the public libraries, a list of free resources. It almost always has LinkedIn Learning. And it's a quick way to sort of upskill whenever you find those new opportunities. So great call out, Steve. And thank you so much, Mark.
My pleasure.
Hey, so Steve, there are so many amazing questions coming in. Let's see where we should start. I'm gonna throw some questions your way if that's okay. So first of all, we are recording, have no fear. However, we'd love for folks to stay on for as much as possible, because we are going to do a lot of giveaways. And let's start with a question first about LAMP, and then we can get into AI. Lauren wants to know, hey, Steve, how did you come up with 40 as the magic number for the LAMP list?
Many failures, Lauren, to be honest. It's the one thing in the entire 2-hour job search that is not rooted in any sort of science. Everything else is rooted to some sort of behavioral psychology concept or operations best practice. 40 was simply, it used to be 100 when the LAMP list was first created. That was overwhelming, and it took too long. And then we tried 20 and it was too short. Like, it didn't get people out of that artificial desperation mindset. When you only have a list of 10 or 20, you need those to work out, because what if you run out? Like, now you're back to square one. You've got to start over again. 40 was the minimum number of companies people had to come up with to get rid of that artificial desperation, where they realized there was a wealth of companies. These are just the ones I'm going to pursue first. It was purely to get people to shift their frame of reference, where they're no longer the commodity, they're the person in control. What I will say is that the last 10 are the hardest to come up with, because I think you can get to 25 without conceding on anything. Once you get to 25 and you want to build it out to 40, you've got to pick, like, what am I willing to sacrifice first? Brand name, location, how close to it? Like, you've got to give up something to get to 40. That said, that's in a pre-ChatGPT world. I'm still processing how this will impact the L column building step of the process myself. But knowing that if you have a thing that you want to learn about, you can ask ChatGPT what companies do this or are in the same space. What do these 6 seemingly disparate companies have in common? And it will give you some themes that you can use to build out that list. But 40 is anecdotal. It's just purely what people needed to get before they were ready to follow the recipe correctly, because they knew they were in control and they weren't a commodity.
Great answer, Steve, and great question, Lauren. Now, here's the ultimate question. This is the elephant that's not just like hiding in the room, it is front and center. Matthew says, come on, Steve, is this going to take the place of career coaches? And he puts a little smiley face next to it, but it's kind of like a winky one where it's like, uh-oh, we're a lot of career coaches here. What's your take?
There was probably a concern that that typewriters would drive out people who, assistants, but assistants learned to use the typewriters and became much more efficient. I think someone will need to help people who have a full academic workload, and this is just for students, figure out how to incorporate AI efficiently. We have more time to noodle with this and experiment. We are the specialists. We should be curating resources into a more usable format for people who are doing their first, second, or fifth job search. We've done hundreds of them. So I don't think it will put career coaches out of business. Someone will still need to handle the more personal elements of the process, and someone will still need to stay on top of technology to figure out what's the most efficient way to use this overwhelming font of knowledge in an efficient way.
Great call out. And then Cola asked a question. He said, I know that we had this problem with some of the companies from 2021 when ChatGPT were trained are actually out of business at this point. Shouldn't we be using ChatGPT 4.0 to get more real-time data? And it is true that if you buy either ChatGPT Plus, which is about 20 bucks a month, or if you use Bing Chat, which is totally free, you can access GPT-4. However, even GPT-4 still requires this little plugin called browsing in order to be able to search the web. In my experience, it's still pretty wonky, but let's find out. What are the top 20 companies in cybersecurity today, just to be really clear? And what you're going to see is it's going to try to browse the web. It's going to basically run its own Google search. So you have one AI talking to another AI, trying to come back with the most recent data. And we'll see what happens. Sometimes it works, sometimes it fails, but definitely a way to sort of stay up to date.
An interesting fact here is that ChatGPT works better for those of you on the East Coast first thing in the morning, before all the West Coasters start hitting the system. So try to use it in off-peak periods, but a lot of the usage is coming from the West Coast, the tech firms out there. So it'll be a little bit slower now than it would have been had we done this session 4 hours ago.
Great call out. Yeah, these clicks fail because the scraper that it uses to pull in the data is still struggling to like parse through HTML and everything. So again, not perfect, but I think it will get there over time. Okay, big question. This is sort of like the number 2 question for all career coaches beyond, will we have a job next year? And that is, what about for international students? They're often the students who have just a real challenge climbing that hill in the US employment market. Can ChatGPT be a democratizer for them?
So this is my thesis of today. If you get no other message from this session, I think that no matter how good AI gets for job seekers, it will never beat AI from employers. So it will make your cover letters better. It will make your resumes better. It will make prepping for informational meetings easier, but that's not what you want. What you want are interviews and eventually jobs. And no matter how good AI gets, it's not going to be able to outsmart the AI that's developed in parallel by the employers. The way that you predictably get interviews is you get referrals to interview. And that means going out and meeting people. Now, these tactics, the process of reaching out to people, of learning information about them, of asking good questions, of practicing informational meetings beforehand, that something like ChatGPT can definitely help you with, but it's not going to be a panacea. An interesting note, the 2-hour job search was originally developed while I was working specifically with international students during the 2008 financial crisis, because a bunch of Bear Stearns went under. That was the first shot in the spring of 2008. They canceled all their offers. A lot of the offers went to our international students who used investment banking as a way to get some US experience. And all the other banks knew some problems were on the way. So that was when I realized the students who had their offers canceled, they had the ability to follow instructions, but they did not have the ability to curate tips into a usable format. And I was giving this particular student the same tips that I was given when I was an MBA student, and she was overwhelmed. She didn't know what to do with it because it was vague. It was not actionable or replicable. So the 2-hour job search and the job closer, I'm not wishy-washy. I give you exact instructions for every step that needs to be done during the job search. But the 2-hour job search is exact instructions for networking with people in an efficient manner for the purpose of getting interviews. And that's the critical piece, especially if you're an international student. This is not going to be necessarily great at telling you who's going to be sponsoring, but I think a lot of people overestimate the likelihood of getting of big companies sponsoring. You kind of know the big companies that sponsor. To me, the arbitrage opportunity is with the smaller, medium-sized employers who may not think they sponsor, but you're a much better level of talent because you found them than they would get on the open US-only market. So how well do you exploit that arbitrage opportunity? By proactively going to smaller, medium-sized companies that are working on topics that you learn about in your spare time. And that's really where you should be looking to diversify away from some of the bigger companies that you're already likely approaching.
That's right. Even if you're an international student, you can still be the bachelor or the bachelorette. So
Absolutely.
Do not give up hope. Okay, speaking of moving on here, I know we've got a ton to cover still. So let's move on to our next pop quiz, which is, based on the latest research, how much more likely are warm leads, in other words, where you know someone on the inside, to close in a sales or business development context than cold leads, where you're just reaching out with a random email, random phone call? Is it 2x, 4x, or 8x? I think there are a lot of believers in the power of relationships. We may have a slightly self-selecting audience here, Steve.
A little bit.
The answer is indeed about 8x. And the fascinating thing is it's not just for sales, it's also for hiring, right? We all know that referrals give you a massive advantage, as Steve just said, over applying cold online. So that being said, Once you decide, hey, I want to be going after IBM security, or I want to go after McAfee, or whatever your dream top companies are, how do you find those insiders? So before we even get to ChatGPT, Steve, could you enlighten everyone how to find the right people in the first place, even if you're an introvert, even if you're an international student?
Yes. First thing, set your expectations to more like a Major League Baseball player. Major League Baseball players, the most successful ones in the world, are only successful about 30% of the time. They bat about 300, and they get paid millions and millions of dollars to do that. When you are networking with people, set your expectations according to that. 30% of the time is great. It was an A on most of my tests as a chemical engineer, a 30 out of 100, excellent. I'm the smartest man alive. But it's tough when you're coming from a world where most of us are successful 80, 90% of the time at the things we try, and we may just try things that we are confident we can do. So just set your expectations according to more according to the unpredictability of strangers. Hearing back from strangers 10 to 20% of the time is great. The way to maximize your likelihood of hearing back from people is to target people who are functionally relevant. Who's doing the job that you want one day right now, or who's doing the job that you want right now, like that you want one day. So functional relevance, everything else that you can use as an icebreaker. They went to the same school. My favorite one is they've gotten a promotion at that company. This isn't great. ChatGPT is not really good at helping you pick out this information because it doesn't have an agreement with LinkedIn to search profiles yet. So I recommend LinkedIn for this particular task. To me, if I find somebody who's been there for 4 or 5 years, they've been promoted from product manager to senior product manager, I don't care if I have an alumni connection to them or not. I care that they're smart and they're successful, and they might be one of the 10 to 20% that are willing to talk to strangers to talk about how they got so smart at their job. It's not everybody, but you kiss enough frogs and the princes come through, and they are more than worth the effort that it took to find them.
Absolutely. And so, as you can see, it's kind of ironic. Everyone's very nervous about ChatGPT and privacy, and we can talk a lot more about that. But it does try to be sensitive to not calling out individuals who are outside the public eye. It says like, hey, if you want to do that, go to LinkedIn, do that on your own. That's not something that we can do. So with that in mind, to demonstrate what this looks like, let's talk about how you would leverage LinkedIn and ChatGPT for the perfect 1-2 punch. So if anyone is feeling especially brave right now and wants to see exactly how this works, because again, Steve is exactly what he said, not about wishy-washiness, but about seeing exactly what you need to do, kind of like a recipe to be successful. So in this case, let's call up Chef Hannah to try out Steve's recipe. So Hannah, feel free to unmute.
Hello.
Hi, Hannah, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you.
And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am currently an MBA student at Santa Clara University. I'm graduating in August, and I'm just starting my job search. So I found this through my school, and I really felt like this was a great topic for me to join, because I actually applied to a job at maybe 10:45 p.m. And I got a rejection within maybe 8 hours. So I kind of assumed that maybe an AI was somewhat involved there. And so it kind of got me thinking, so how do I leverage AI and, potentially, kind of just keep that in mind when I'm navigating this job search, before graduation. So I have more tools in my toolkit.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining, Hannah, and go Broncos.
Go Broncos.
To help Steve and I get started here, tell us a little bit about the kinds of jobs you're excited about in terms of job title, maybe the kinds of companies or industries.
Absolutely. So I have a background in digital marketing. I have had jobs in digital media, so content management for websites, handling different forms of media. And then my most recent job was a marketing specialist for Fanatics. So I worked in paid search or paid shopping for both Google advertising and Microsoft advertising. So I have a lot of background in utilizing data to track performances for campaigns and ads. And so I'm looking to get back into the world of digital marketing, as well as working in business strategy or business analytics.
Love it. And so if you were in Hannah's shoes, Steve, where would you begin?
So can you give me an example of a few of your favorite companies?
Yeah, definitely looking at Google, Apple. I'm looking at Cisco as well as some other companies. Just personally, I love video games, so I'm looking at Nintendo or PlayStation. And I love sports, so looking at Warriors or 49ers, something like that.
Nice.
Excellent.
All right.
Okay.
So we start out on LinkedIn, Steve?
Yes. And what would you say is the ideal job title that you're looking for?
Yeah, I would say marketing analyst or business analyst, marketing specialist.
Business analyst. So one thing, Jeremy, while we're in ChatGPT, can we hop back there? Ask what the career progression at Google is for a business analyst.
Ooh, let's see. You're putting my typing skills to the test here.
I don't know if this works. We're all living dangerously here.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
This is like the hierarchy. And this is true. This is actually how it is organized at Google.
So if you're ever concerned about like what job title am I looking for, who's got what job, how high should I reach, who's 1 to 2 levels above me, you can kind of get a sense for what the career progression is. You can also ask what are the top 10 projects that a business analyst would do at a company like Google, and it will give you a list of here are the projects you'll probably need to be doing at some point. So I like that it gives you kind of that wherewithal of like how high should I be reaching when I reach out to someone. I think the ideal is 1 to 2 levels above where you would start. So if you're coming in as an analyst, I'd be looking to network with a business analytics manager, for example. So now we can go to LinkedIn. I'll show you my favorite way to find, I completely forgot. What was that called? A manager of analytics, Jeremy, in the ChatGPT?
Oh yeah, sure. Business analytics manager. Yep.
Business analytics manager.
Yep.
So my favorite place to look up people is to click on that search box, the type, just hit enter.
Yep.
And then go to the all filters ribbon on the top right. And now we can go to current companies.
Yeah.
And
there it
hit
is.
Google, and then we can go down and go to title.
Yeah.
And we can put that title in there that I already once again forgot.
It's a mouthful.
And now it'll say here are 23 people that are going to be 1 to 2 levels above where you would start. These are people that you could potentially reach out to. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn groups because they let you message people directly for free. But that's we don't have the time to demo that here, but join all the LinkedIn groups is my recommendation here. But these people, most of them are going to ignore you. But if you reach out to enough of them, and you ask them, can you tell me how you got so smart at your job in a likable way? You're going to get a hit on some of them. And once you get that foothold, they'll be able to triage you to helpful people that are similar to them in their organization. And that's where the good stuff really starts to happen. In terms of drafting that message, I recommend a technique in the 2-hour job search called the 6-point email. And ChatGPT can draft this for you. It has trouble with one of the 6 points. But I think based on what you've said, you've got a pretty good sense of the kind of genre of companies that you're interested in. That's the one that people struggle with the most. But the 6 points are put your connection first, make at least half the word count about the recipient, make sure you make your ask in the form of a question rather than a statement, keep it under 75 words, define your interest both specifically and broadly. And that's the one that people get stuck with mostly. They'll say, I want to talk to you about your analyst experience at Google. And then they won't provide context. The reason I'm asking is I'm trying to learn more about business analytics in the digital marketing space, or whatever genre you would use to describe a company like Google. Google does everything. So I'd be picking out things that people do. I'd be picking out something that's close to where this person's actually working, because a company that huge, they're going to be pretty siloed. But I would basically give it the 6 points of the 6-point email and tell it to return a 75-word email back to me that hits these points. The one thing you'll probably need to tweak is that genre of interest. Your insights be greatly appreciated because I'm trying to learn more about X at Y. I give them that genre so they don't think you just spotted a job posting and you're chasing whatever job posting you saw. This is part of a strategy. This is something you're learning about in your spare time anyway. This person can help you get that understanding.
What do you think, Hannah? Sorry, Hannah, let me just ask you to mute one more time.
Yep, I had myself muted. This looks awesome. I think that there's a lot of really great opportunities for me to, utilize, just reaching out to people. I think I'm starting to do that now, but I've maybe reached out to maybe less than 5. So I think this would be a great template for me to kind of just finding, seeing what sticks. And you never know what you might find if you reach out enough.
Absolutely. And Steve, just to give Hannah a sense of sort of that probability game that you're playing here, how many folks would you suggest you reach out to?
So for me, I think everything has instructions. So from the email, this email is okay, but I would want it to be a little bit more authentic,
Okay.
a little bit more customized.
Yeah.
But ChatGPT did this in no time, which is great. But there are scripts in the 2-hour job search if you want to do the deeper dive, compare it to what GPT came up with. But for me, outreach takes time and it takes focus. And those are both scant resources when you're in an academic program and you're stressed. And this is not a fun topic. So I recommend targeting just 6 companies, but in a systematic way. So you're reaching out to one person with a 6-point email. You're giving them 3 business days to respond. To me, if they respond within 3 business days, they're probably on your side. They might be what I'd call a booster. But if somebody takes longer than 3 business days to respond, they're probably not going to get back to you. So let's hedge our bets and try a second person. But we're doing that with 6 companies simultaneously. So we're going to get ignored a bunch. We're only going to hear back about 20% of the time. So we need to have a good reminder system in our calendar. So when you send the email, you're thinking clearly. Look up temporal control theory. It's a fascinating topic, but we're thinking clearly when we send the email. We're not thinking clearly after we get ignored for 3 days.
Yeah.
So set the reminders when you send the email. And that way, when the 3-day reminder pops up, if you haven't heard back, it's too soon to follow up. Let's try somebody else. And then set 3 and 7 business day reminders on them. The 7 business day reminders when you check back in. There's a great video on 3B7 from the 2-hour job search. If you Google it, it's on YouTube.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Hannah. You were fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Good
much.
luck with the search. Good luck with the NBA. Go Broncos.
Go Broncos. Thank you so much.
Woohoo. Okay, so Steve, a bunch of questions coming in here. Harsh wants to know, and this is kind of a bridge between what we just talked about and then what we're talking about now. How useful in your experience so far has ChatGPT been in identifying the gap between the job that you're applying for and the skills you have? So can ChatGPT help you sort of close that chasm?
I don't think it needs to. I think it's a problem in most people's minds. So in the job closer, I talk about this concept I co-developed with some of my former Fuqua colleagues called the 4 buckets of work. And this is especially useful for military vets who are transitioning out through MBA programs, for example. They're like, I don't know, my experience is all in the military. It doesn't really translate to anything. And we'd ask them, well, are you comfortable leading? They'd say yes. Are you comfortable collaborating? They'd say yes. Are you comfortable solving tough problems? They'd say yes. Are you comfortable getting things done? They'll say absolutely. Okay, then you can literally do any job because every job needs those 4 buckets of work done, but the jargon will change. So it really is more about, okay, these are the 4 things that need to get done. It's hilarious. If you look up job postings from a myriad of different industries, you'll see it keeps coming back to those 4 themes with just slightly different language. So I don't think there is a gap for you to close other than to be able to have a conversation using some of the vernacular that people in that job you're looking to switch to already are comfortable and fluent with. And informational meetings and even mock informational meetings with ChatGPT, figuring out what terms do I need to be conversant in to make this conversation, make it sound like I belong here. That's really the gap you need to close. It's not about the transferable skills. You already have those 4 buckets of work, and that's the most important set.
Love that. Basically, if you want to become an insider, speak like an insider. That's how you get inside. Esau asked a great question. And LinkedIn, is there a way to see which people in the company are connected to me somehow? Absolutely. So in this list, one other thing we could have done is we could have said, show me everyone on that Google list who either knows me directly, 1st degree, or knows someone that I know, 2nd degree. And then in terms of getting in touch, we could say, hey, Matthew may not know me directly, but Christine can introduce me, Corey can introduce me, and now you have another way in. Great call out there, Esau. Okay, let's see here. Helen says, does a 6-point email change if you know the company/role that you're interested in?
Absolutely. I mean, you'd be reaching out to people who have that role. you would hopefully have that. To me, I call it the modern elevator pitch. It's that the ability to take the universe of all possible employers and put them into a logical subset in about 10 words or less. So I'm interested in learning more about product management in the autonomous vehicle space or in the video game space. Like that, okay, so what I tell you is going to be helpful for your future conversations. And you probably already talked to people at other companies doing this. So you're probably going to be a fun conversation to have. I see people really struggle with this when they're trying to do an informational meeting with Google, which does literally everything, but not all of the same things that Amazon does or Apple. And they don't have that genre of interest in mind. What do these things have in common? One of the chats that I put into ChatGPT recently was, what can I learn about Google that will also help me learn about Amazon, Apple, and Facebook? And it was very thoughtful. It was incredibly thoughtful, the feedback it gave about being a multi-platform system. And like, do that. If you're looking at companies that don't seem to have anything in common, look it up in ChatGPT so you can get that 10-word phrase that helps you kind of substantiate. I'm not just going after Google because it's the brand name and it's a fun office to hang out in. Like, this is the niche that I'm particularly interested in that has something in common with the other big tech giants.
Awesome. And then last question from Mark, and we'll move on to our final section. Any tips on getting out of the LinkedIn inbox? Lots of messages seem to go there to die. I think the first thing is use Steve's approach. Make it more personal, make it more engaging. The dirty little secret as a former LinkedIn employee is the vast majority of LinkedIn users are not active. It's not Instagram, it's not Facebook, it's not even Twitter. People just are not using it that much, so they're not checking their inbox. What they are checking, of course, is their own email, their work email. So if you want to figure out anyone's work email, go over to a site called hunter.io.
Huge fan.
Hey, go for that again.
Huge fan.
Huge fan, yeah.
Hunter.io. I use it all the time.
There's a million ones like this. So if you've already got one you like, use that. But it will tell you the email pattern for pretty much any company in the world. And this is true, by the way. LinkedIn's email pattern is first initial, last name at linkedin.com. Reid Hoffman's email, if you ever want to email him with complaints, is rhoffman@linkedin.com. And then to Steve's point, you got to follow up too. Even if they don't respond in that first message, use a tool like followupthen.com to give yourself those 3- and 7-day reminders so that even if you're corresponding with Elon Musk of all people, you get that little sort of ding in your inbox, hey, it's time to keep the conversation going. They're not going to do it on their end, so you've got to be responsible on your end. Anything else you want to call it there, Steve?
Yeah, Mark, I would just add that visualize all of the strangers that you're going to be reaching out to as belonging to one of 3 segments. There are people who will never respond to you under any circumstances. I call them curmudgeons. They're awful people. They hate babies. They kick puppies, or they just have no interest in helping you find a job. They're not the worst segment because they're clear about not being helpful. They just ignore you. The worst group is that second group, a group I call obligates. Obligates want to appear to be helpful, but they don't actually want to be helpful because that's inconvenient and incurs some risk. So they'll do things like set up a meeting with you, but cancel at the last minute, get really weird about rescheduling, or they'll respond to you slowly. And sometimes they won't respond at all. They're dangerous because they give you a negative return on effort. They waste your time. So we think we're being nice when we kind of half engage with job seekers. If we don't really want to engage with them, we're actually being worse than if we just cold ignored them or told them, I'm sorry, I don't have the bandwidth to help you right now. That's the more decent approach. But the majority of help you get in your job search will be from the 20% of the population that I call boosters. They're intrinsically motivated to help others succeed. They want to pay forward the help they've gotten in the past. So just know, like, the people who are ignoring you are doing you a favor. It's the people who string you along that are really dangerous in this process. The job search and networking for business development purpose terms for people who are not looking to job search right now, who are just looking to network internally or to develop clients. The people who string you along are the dangerous ones. You just need to be comfortable with most people ignoring you and that being okay. The nice thing about a 6-point email is it's designed to appeal to boosters specifically because they don't have this artificially high bar of what they need to see from you in order to respond to you. So just get comfortable. We're Major League Baseball players now. 30% is awesome if we can hit it.
Woohoo. And speaking of boosters, we've got to boost into our final section here because we only have 10 minutes left.
Oh gosh.
But
so much fun.
This might be the most important because this is getting away from the technology and the algorithms. This is getting to human technology and human algorithms, the way that we all think and the way we all connect with others. So if you had to guess which approach in a recent University of Chicago study led to the strongest feelings of connectedness, even between 2 total strangers, was it A, small talk? Hey, how about that weather? How about that sports team? B, asking questions? Or C, making your elevator pitch, the thing that MBAs are always trained to do, sell yourself. So A, B, or C, what leads to feeling connected? And like Felix says, Wendy says, Paul says, Bailey says, Kyle says, everyone is saying B, and you are absolutely right. And survey after survey, experiment after experiment, even when two people have nothing else in common, when they have a chance to ask really important questions, it really leads to a deeper conversation. So now, Steve, here we are. The introverts of the world are saying we can do all this stuff. We can play around on ChatGPT, we can play around on LinkedIn, but now we have to talk to someone in the real world? How do we possibly do that, Steve?
Absolutely. I think just remember this conversation's not about you. It's about featuring what this person knows. And when you go at it with that attitude, like that mentality, it's a lot easier. We're just giving this person a gift. We're asking them how they got so smart at their job. We might be the only person who's done that in the last 5 years. And that's a fun conversation to have if you approach them with that being the stated goal of the meeting, and then you actually conduct yourself in a manner. So the good approach, the 6-point email, is designed to ask people how they got so smart at their jobs. Once we actually get them into a conversation, I recommend a framework called Tiara, which is a very purposeful journey that you take them on through questions in an informational meeting to maximize the intimacy that you can form with a total stranger within a 30-minute meeting that is professionally focused. Yeah, so there's lots of resources out there if you want to look this up further. So we want to build some likability with small talk. We want to prime creativity with trend and insight questions. We want to start getting them to see us not as, we want to start portraying them not as an expert, but as a potential mentor when we get into the advice and resources categories. And the resource category is where we ask for referrals without asking for referrals, because we're not asking for referrals. That's a bait and switch, but we will give them a safe space to offer referrals if they're so inclined. And then assignments, it's just where you build your mental toolbox. Although with ChatGPT, that's getting less and less important. I want you to build your mental toolbox of specific projects you would need to do if you were a digital marketing expert for a company, or a graphic designer, or whatever role you're looking to switch into, a computer engineer, or a software engineer. Like, you can look up, tell me the 10 projects that I'm most likely to do as a software engineer. And like, you can start applying what your skills are, your ability to get things done, your ability to code very elegantly and efficiently. You can tie that back to a project that you know a software engineer needs to get done. And that just makes you a much more credible candidate.
And then Yaniv must have read our minds, because he says, that sounds great, Steve, but can you ask ChatGPT to create TR questions using someone's LinkedIn profile? So
You absolutely. Oh, good. You could. To me, it's not really going to know. It will give you questions back that may work in isolation. The reason I like Tiara is it is a suite of questions that are asked in a very specific order to build likability and then prime creativity, so that when you ask for advice and mentorship, you get better quality answers. So that's the thing that ChatGPT can't do really well. It can't synthesize. It can give you very good information on micro topics or specific topics, but putting it into a logical order of attack, creating the grand recipe, it's not there yet. It will be one day, and then I'll also be concerned. But my recommendation would be go in with a plan of attack, and ChatGPT just isn't quite there yet.
That's awesome. And so just to show what's possible and what's not possible, because we want to be clear about the limitations, we need one final volunteer to raise their hand real fast right now, get the last copy of the book, and the last chance for some personal coaching straight from Steve. And I saw that Teresa was the first to raise her hand, because I believe Prisha maybe had their hand up for the last one. So Teresa, feel free to unmute, and then we will go ahead and dive into this conversation. Welcome, Teresa.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Teresa, tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you. Hi, I'm a career advisor for IE Business School. I'm currently sitting in Madrid, where it's sunny and great. Yeah. And we are big fans in our team of the 2-hour job search. So we know all about the 6-point email. We keep using it for our students. We have a very international crowd of MBAs, 240 approximately per batch. And they come from all over the world, and they want to work all over the world. So we have a lot of international students with a lot of different expectations. So it's very interesting to be on this side advising them.
That's awesome. Thank you for staying up late to join us. And tell us about sort of what are some of your students' challenges with these informational interviews? Where do they really struggle?
I don't think, for starters, I don't think they see the point. So we keep trying to throw the numbers at them and all the research-based conclusions that you guys share, right? But it's not really getting through. They are firm believers in the clicking apply as if it were, some other social media. So they really want this, they really want a systematic and organized approach. And that's what I'm hoping to get out of today.
Got it.
In clear instructions for everybody.
And so what would your advice be, Steve? First of all, how do you sell the value of this? And then number two, how do you give them the tools to execute?
I think the value to me, I cite a different stat from Brown, Setron, and Topa that for every one person who's hired through an online job posting, 12 are hired through an internal referral.
Wow.
If people want to pursue the online job posting and they're willing to aim for the 1 out of 13 jobs, I think that's crazy, but it's a choice. It is a choice. It's not a good choice, but to me, especially working with business students, I mean, like when you kind of put that on its face, it's like, you're really choosing the 1 out of 13. How can you justify that? That's not a good business decision. You don't have unlimited time and energy. But people sometimes need to come at it. They need to fail before they can succeed. Sometimes they need to follow different hypotheses before they're ready for a more organized, advocacy building oriented approach. Where I find the most value for informational meetings, that's where career coaches come in, to help them work through the roadblocks of not wanting to network. I mean, ChatGPT is not there yet. That's something that we need to do through infrastructure we create and the coaching that we deliver. But once they decide that they want to commit, I think ChatGPT is really good at getting people, especially international students, over those initial jitters of doing an informational meeting with a stranger when we feel like we're imposing on them, when in reality, Steve just said that we're actually doing them a favor by letting them feel smart for a half an hour. So I recommend it. The nice thing about ChatGPT, so on my screen, I don't want to bounce between screens here, but I set up a prompt. You are a very smart senior product manager at Google. I would like to practice an informational interview with you that will last 30 minutes. We've emailed before to set this meeting up, but we otherwise haven't met. We will begin with me asking you this question. How is your day going so far? And so teeing it up like that, and it says, okay. And every time I ask it a question, so Tiara, the first question is a trend question. What trend is most impacting your business right now? What ChatGPT will come back with is, I'm an AI, so I'm not a product manager at Google, but here are the top trends that are impacting product managers and the tech multi-platform space. Yeah, so we're seeing here.
And what I love about this, for both Steve and for everyone, is that this is a safe space to experiment. You don't have to feel like, oh my goodness, the very first time I meet an alum is the first time that I ever practiced this. Instead, you've had a chance to really go through the motions and just like a professional athlete, build them into your muscle memory so it feels like second nature. Does that feel doable for you over in Madrid? Uh-oh, we may have lost her.
She's on mute.
Oh yeah, no worries, no worries. Well, in any case, Steve, is there anything else you would call out in terms of how to use ChatGPT to get ready for this moment, to ask smart questions, to really become very comfortable and confident in this sometimes awkward conversation?
Yeah, I don't rebuild the wheel. I've spent a decade refining Tiara as a good base model. It will make you a good basic lasagna, and then try that basic recipe once, and then you can modify that recipe. These are like, so it's not actually giving you the question here. It's giving you some trends that you should be familiar with so that when you hear them, you're hearing them for the second time instead of hearing them for the first time. But I do recommend going in with a model like Tiara, or find a different recipe if you find one. I don't know of any others. But make sure that you're asking your questions in a logical order, because the goal is to get this person to share you with their network after you follow up on this conversation a little bit later. But this is great for learning terms that you should be aware of if you're talking to someone in this space, trends that are already going on in their space, insights that past product managers have said are important to be successful at a company like Google. Like, you can ask it really anything you want, and you will be consistently surprised at the quality of answer you get back.
That's awesome. And so I know we're at time. I know that a lot of the coaches on the line have to run to their own coaching sessions right now, or hopefully they can apply some of this right away. That being said, let's wrap up with two things, Steve, for anyone who can stay on the line a little longer. Let's just go quickly through the job search, covering the 2 books you've written, to understand where AI does or does not fit in, just to give people sort of that summation. And then let's give people some next steps in terms of how they can engage with you, how they can learn more. Okay?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Speed round.
Speed round, exactly. Introducing Lightning Round with Steve Dalton. So Obviously we just talked about beginning a career. When you think about that through the eyes of a job searcher in 2023, what do you think, Steve? To AI,
Chat-
not to AI?
Absolutely incorporate AI, but it will never be able to tell you what you want to do. It won't be able to tell you where you find energy and what motivates you. So choosing a career, that is a very inherently human process. Just like selecting offers on the back end. So the blue topics are the ones covered by the job closure, the orange are the ones covered by the 2-hour job search. So I think these are bookended by very human elements, that choosing a career and selecting offers. ChatGPT is not there yet. It might never be there because every person's different and we all find different motivations and different things.
Awesome. How about the age-old task of resume, cover letter? What do you think?
It is great for that. For a pro tip, if you have already interviewed recently or in the past, you might have some stories sketched out. Just plug those stories into ChatGPT and ask it for a 30-word summary that would be appropriate as a bullet point on a resume. And it will condense that story down to 30 words in a very, very effective fashion. And that becomes your bullet point. Ideally, your bullet points are teasers for the story you're going to tell in the interview. ChatGPT is really good at boiling them down in such a fashion. So it can crank out a cover letter in seconds. So tell it what your background is, show it the posting that you're applying to, and it will come up with something pretty good. I teach a method that will help you get to better than pretty good. But the time savings is dramatic. The easiest thing to do would just be start with whatever it gives you and modify it. Where I really like to see some synthesis is when you tie back what you're good at. You're good at problem solving. You're good at building relationships. Tie it back to a specific project that needs to get done for the role that you're pursuing, so they know what you're raising your hand for. I teach a technique called reason anecdote connection in the job closer. So you can learn more about it. That's how you take it up a notch. And it just doesn't take that much time. It makes for very lean and mean 250-word cover letters consistently.
Absolutely. And then what about getting to the 2-hour job search a little bit? We've talked about these three. Anything else you want to call out above and beyond what we've already covered?
No, it's great. And my mind's still racing, grasping the full potential of it. So start playing around with ChatGPT. It can do things I'm sure of right now that I haven't even thought to ask it yet. So absolutely, it's going to make all of those 3 steps easier. But nothing will replace the shoe leather and elbow grease of reaching out to strangers, accommodating in your life the consistent stream of rejection that is just part of doing business. There's just no other way to do networking where you guarantee that you're going to get a response 80% of the time. The good news about it is most people will give up because they're not successful 80% of the time. So the people who actually are able to readjust their mindset towards being more like a professional baseball player or a chemical engineer in undergrad will be successful. So there's an arbitrage opportunity. There's a time right now where you can beat the market by being comfortable with most people ignoring you, but continuing to try.
Woohoo. And then as we head towards the home stretch, what about that really scary interview coming up? Can ChatGPT get you ready for prime time?
It can give you scripts, but I think it can cause more harm right now than good. Success in interviews is not about saying the right words in the right order. That's a common misperception of many job seekers, especially those working in a second language, who are terrified that they're not using the right words or saying the right words in the right order. There is so much authenticity being gauged during interviews. The job closer goes into the science of the interview. Basically, so many decisions are made in the first 5 minutes, and 4 out of 5 are decided by the 15th minute. So what happens then? It's small talk. It's tell me about yourself. Why do you want to work for our company? Why do you want to work in this role? Like most of interview decisions are done by the time you get to past what I call the big 4. The 4 questions that usually kick off an interview. So you can read more about that in the job closer. It's good at giving you a script, but if you're using a script when you're interviewing, you're doing poorly. Have an outline in your mind and talk through the outline. So I don't think its potential is really there yet for interviewing. The interview tools that are proliferating as we speak. It may change. I may change my tune on that in a year or 2. But I don't see any near-term future where saying the right words in the right order is sufficient without being authentic underneath it.
Nice. What about you get the job offer? Is it still time to come back to ChatGPT, or is that just a human thing?
Absolutely use ChatGPT to try to benchmark. It will probably give you a mixed bag of responses, some of which may not even be true. But absolutely, you can ask it, what other factors should I be looking at when I negotiate? I talked through this in the job closer as well. Negotiation is another very, very human element of the job search because we value different things differently. So I would say it's not ready for prime time there, but it's great for trying to benchmark what the going rates on certain industries are.
Cool. And obviously, always keep in mind that 2021 challenge. So make sure you have the most up-to-date information working in your favor. And then last but not least, you've got to choose a job that's not just a random gig, but a thing to build a great life around. How do you choose the right offer?
Yeah, that's absolutely a human thing. I recommend a technique called the You Bet Your Life exercise in the job closer. It's really simple, but it's the thing that my former students will come back a decade later and say, you taught me this, and I still use it today to choose between difficult binary decisions where it's this or that. So I recommend listening to your heart, but being a little bit more organized than that.
Awesome. Now, Steve, I know folks are saying, I've got to run, but I want to stay in touch. What's the best way to get in touch with you? What would you recommend?
I think on LinkedIn, I'm there all the time. I have a LinkedIn group I'm about to put into the chat box where it's called the 2-Hour Job Search and the Job Closer Q&A Forum. So we have over 11,000 members now, which is crazy to me because I just did it to help a few dozen people when this whole thing started out who were using my recipes. But it's purely on the 2-Hour Job Search and the Job Closer. So it will use a lot of the terminology from those books, but it's free. And I'm on there a few times a week. I answer it when I can, but I'm here a lot. So find me on LinkedIn. Join the LinkedIn group if you are so inclined. It's a lot of fun. It's how I learn as well. So I'd love to see all of you there.
Woohoo. Okay. If folks want to get the books, I assume they should go to their favorite bookseller, or what do you recommend?
Or any public library. Support your libraries too. So absolutely either of those options. They're both available on Audible. The Job Closer just came out in 2021, and the audio version of the 2-Hour Job Search is read by me now. That just came out in last year. It's a little bit tough to find in Audible though. So make sure that you find the one with the orange cover if you want to listen to me talk about job searching while you jog.
That's awesome. And then last but not least, Contact a Colleague, your newest venture. What's the best way to engage there?
I think absolutely, if you're interested in hearing more about how I can train your people to network proactively on their own, definitely reach out to me directly through LinkedIn is totally fine. But it's unfair to expect people from widely different backgrounds to all know how to build their network inside an organization. It's not a skill that was ever prioritized in a class in college or in high school. So I'm a big believer in leveling the playing field, making internal networking, the importance of that, equitable, and teaching people how to do it if that's an expectation in your role. For a lot of roles, like if you're a lawyer, you're going to need to develop business, and that ability to turn strangers into advocates on demand is going to be what determines whether you can do this or not. So please, I do start class cohorts. I do one-off professional development trainings. I work with employee resource groups, but I'm happy to take my principles on turning strangers into advocates on demand for the purpose of internal networking and business development and present them to your organization. Feel free to reach out.
I love it. And then I think we're going to close with 2 final things for anyone who's still hanging in there with us, and we're still with 300 people. Not bad. Let's take maybe 2 or 3 final questions, just because I know there were a lot of things that piled up at the end. And then Steve got some closing thoughts to share with y'all. So first of all, if you've got any questions that did not get answered, please just put them in the chat right now. We're going to do our best to get to a couple of them. And then obviously we can continue the conversation in the LinkedIn group. For now, let's start with this question, which is, I know someone had mentioned this before, Steve, I would love to get coaching certification for 2-Hour Job Search. I believe you had mentioned something to that me in our little pre-chat. So tell us more. Yes,
that is something that is going to be coming in the next year. I was choosing what projects I was going to prioritize. Right now, launching Contact a Colleague and building my business and presence in the corporate space and with alumni groups with the purpose of helping people network proactively to level the playing field. That's really where my passion and energy is. Also developing a 3rd book is on the horizon somewhere as well, but the 3rd book will probably be a workbook for the 2-Hour Job Search, which will be very similar to the certification program, kind of the format that I'll follow there. So those projects are going to be developed in tandem over the next year. Stay tuned. I can't wait to get to it too, but I had to start applying to conferences that are happening more than 13 months from now, but somehow have a deadline. That was last week. Yeah, stay tuned on that one. Feel free to shoot me an email and I'll keep you updated. That's awesome. Mark says, are there any configurations or prompts that you use consistently with ChatGPT to improve the quality of the responses? That's a really good question. I think the most underappreciated one is the feedback question. I liked this part of the answer. I did not like this part of the answer. Can you give me another answer? Or can you repeat? Can you give me a more informed answer? Right. That's the best way to do it. People don't realize you can push back on ChatGPT. It doesn't give you the same answer every time. You can give it feedback on what it's done well and what it hasn't. But I mean, I've read an article about people using this for for therapy. Like, you are a cognitive behavioral therapy counselor. Can you talk me through this particular challenge I'm facing? And it can represent being a CBT therapist. I can't say that the advice will be great, but it will probably be founded in some basic fundamental concepts of the process. This really is a challenge of imagination. So just make sure you know that you're a partner in this. You iterate with ChatGPT, it learns from you, you learn from it. The best way to get a higher quality answer is to say what you like and what you would like more of.
Oh, Dan's got a super juicy question. Any thoughts on doing a Google Sheets integration so we can automate lamp list production? And just to give a little more context, I think Dan is speaking to some of these things that I've been sharing recently, where basically you can pull ChatGPT into a Google Sheet and it can start to spit out, all sorts of pre-baked prompts for whatever your topic might be, LinkedIn profile, interview questions, whatever. Would you ever do that for lamp list?
Never say never, but the lamp list done correctly only takes 70 minutes.
Okay.
So there's not a ton of time savings there. And there are elements that ChatGPT is not going to be able to do. It's not going to be able to score your motivation using arbitrary coherence. Like, that's a gut feeling score. That's something that you would need to generate. It's not allowed to go into Indeed or LinkedIn Jobs and say, okay, relevant, these postings are relevant, these postings are less relevant, this one doesn't have any postings. It's not there yet. That may happen at some point, but it only takes 70 minutes. So at most, you would be saving 70 minutes of time. I don't see a way that the savings is worth the ramp up. So we're not there yet for a lamp list. The lamp list is pretty personal. It's driven by your own motivations. But it is 70 minutes of due diligence before you spend dozens of hours reaching out to strangers and asking them for the gift of their time. So to me, it's appropriate due diligence. I just haven't found a way to automate it.
Awesome. Well worth your time. Now, Don says, and this is really speaking to that new contact to colleague venture, what if I'm not looking for a new job, but I just want to advance within my current job, get a promotion, get career growth? Is there some way that AI and ChatGPT can help me accomplish that?
I would say no. Or let me rephrase that. It's not a no. It's there is something out there that is better for you than trying to use ChatGPT. ChatGPT would be great for learning more about your sector. But what gets you promoted is having not just your manager say nice things about you at promotion time. That's table stakes. You're expected to have at least that. It's getting other managers who are not your direct manager to say that you have potential as well. And that you can only do through networking. It's reaching out to strangers, asking them for the gift of their time, and then asking them how they got so smart at their job. And what all the 2-hour job search is I give you a very efficient frameworks that are rooted in research and science, wherever possible, for doing that as efficiently and effectively as possible with a random stranger. But that's going to be what gets you promoted at your job. Or it's business development, which is the same thing. You've got to turn strangers into advocates on demand. So you can use it to learn, but what will move you up to the next level probably isn't more learning. It's probably getting more people aware of who you are and what potential you have.
Great call out, and good luck out there, Don. Really important question now, because Helen's playing the long game, not just focus on getting a quick job. I'm learning how to network in the tech space. How do you keep up that network after the initial contact? Build relationships for life.
Oh gosh, here's my take, and I'd be curious to get yours, Jeremy, since you've worked in the tech space. I'm just a tourist. For me, I think when you are working with what I call boosters, these are these people that are just intrinsically motivated to help you. If you let them know once you're done searching, here's where I landed, thanks to, in part to your help and your support, you can leave them in the fridge for 5 years. They've got their own lives going on. They don't need regular updates from you. They're not expecting to hear from you. They're not sending you updates, every few months. But when you give them that kind of like that nice ending of like, here's where your work helped, your donation of time helped me. Here's what it helped me achieve. You can let those relationships go for a long period of time and then check back in when you need something, and that's totally fine. It's organic, it's authentic. That's the nice thing about it. But the idea that we need to be in touch with everybody every year or every 3 months, like there's no real way to do that without sending mass emails, which nobody likes, apparently. So to me, just be authentic. Thank them for the gift of their time, and they're helping you to get to the place where you got. and then just let them know. I'll keep you posted. If you've come across an article or something authentic that you think really would resonate with them, then it's authentic. Absolutely send that article on. But I don't believe in setting reminders for every year so that you can force an article their way. They've got enough work to do. Make it authentic, or just leave it be for a little bit.
Totally agreed. And let's finish out with one last question that I think kind of sums up the duality we've been covering today, Steve. The best of AI versus the best of humanity. Louise Jackson over University of Michigan says, what do you think about all these new tools that use AI to help coach around interviews? Things like LinkedIn's interview tool. There's a tool called Udly that just came out that's really good for that. Basically, it's trying to use AI to understand how effective a communicator you are. Do you buy that?
I think it will get there one day. I think these are a bit, but I haven't checked in on them in a year. But they were very focused on kind of basic stuff like eye contact and pauses and the kind of mechanical things that good speakers do, most of which evade me. But what the small body of research out there on interviewing tends to show is that it's all about authenticity. It's all about how likable you are. So I think 30% of interview decisions are made within the first 5 minutes. What can they really accomplish then? It's small talk and it's tell me about yourself. That's what happens in the first 5 minutes. So for me, like just playing the numbers, if 80% of decisions are made by the first 15th minute, I'd be really loading up on the big four, the first half of that interview, because most decisions are made by the time you get through that. To me, that's about telling true stories well. And that is more of telling something that you can say in a believable fashion that isn't a rehearsed script. These are nice for the ums and the pauses and the eye contact, but it's the overall package that people are kind of estimating in that first 5 minutes of an interview. And then they're kind of back solving of like, okay, I like this candidate. I'm going to keep rooting for them. The bias starts to set in, the confirmation bias. If we like them after the first 5 minutes, we'll tend to continue liking them. If we don't like them after 5 minutes, we tend to find reasons why they're not going to move on to the next round. So I think they're a nice tool, especially if they build confidence from job seekers, but making sure that they're in with a human who can tell them that just didn't feel authentic. That thing that makes your skin crawl, that's going to hurt people in interviews more than getting words wrong or not making a point fluidly. So it might get there, but that's my concern with these tools right now. They might be over-engineering less important factors than overall authenticity.
The bottom line, as much as we're obsessing about these new algorithms, don't forget our human algorithms, our hardwiring for how we really build rapport. So Steve, I know you've got some final thoughts that you want to share in terms of where this is all headed, how career coaches and job seekers and networkers should think about it. What's your take?
Okay, my overall take, use AI for your tactics of your job search, but AI is never going to beat online job postings. If you're thinking like this will mean that my application that I put at google.com for a product manager job there is going to get me through. It's not going to do that. Job seeker focused AI will never beat employer focused AI. They have the finite resource. There's fewer jobs than there are people who want those jobs in a lot of these giant companies that you're probably like applying to ad nauseum. But they can be used to make a cover letter, a really decent cover letter pretty quickly, make a bullet point pretty quickly for your resume, so you can save time from things that you thought were going to be time consuming, like resumes and cover letters, and devote that time to networking, which offers a much more predictable, much higher return on effort per hour invested. So it will let it help you with the tactics, the necessary evils of the job search, the resumes and cover letters, but recognize that savings has to be applied to turning strangers into advocates to get through in the modern job search. AI is not going to be the answer by itself. It's going to help you with tactics, but not the overall strategy. You've got to be comfortable getting ignored by most people to be successful with that.
Wow, what a great note to end on. Basically, the idea that we have this incredible new tool in our toolkit, but it's still just one tool of the many that we all possess to really be rock stars in our various pursuits. So Steve, you are my rock star. You launched my career. I can't thank you enough for that. And now paying it forward to the next generation. Everyone, please shower Steve with love here in the chat, on LinkedIn, and definitely keep the conversation going because we would love to learn from you as well. So thank you so much, Steve. Thank you to our incredible volunteers, the awesome question askers, and everyone for investing time in this really important conversation today. I'm wishing you all a fantastic end of the semester. Great start to the summertime.
Thank you all. Take care.